For that, our third presentation has two speakers for you today. The emerging PFAS regulatory regime is going to be discussed by Sarah Latessa, a research scientist at the Bureau of Water Resources Management, the Division of Water at the New York State DEC, and Daniel Rierich, PhD, Bureau of Water Assessment and Management at the Division of Water at DEC. Sarah, as I mentioned, is a research scientist working in resource management. She has over 16 years experience with a variety of state programs, most recently focusing on permitting strategies surrounding emerging contaminants. Daniel Rierich, PhD. Dr. Rierich is background is in aquatic toxicology and limnology. He earned his PhD in environmental and life sciences at Trent University in Ontario. Thank you. So they're going to split up this session, so change when you need to. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi everyone. I'm going to give a very quick overview of our Division of Water ambient surface water monitoring. Before I go into that, talk a little bit about our guidance values. So in 2023, we introduced guidance values for PFOS and PFOA. For PFOS, we had aquatic life criteria, and for PFOA and PFOS, we had health water source guidance values. Those are presented in that square there, but they apply to Class A, AA waters, which is often drinking water sources. So to understand more of the baseline across New York State, what our occurrences of PFAS are, we have conducted this ambient surface water monitoring in lakes and streams throughout the state. We sample about 70 water bodies each summer using EPA 1633, so that's 40 analytes. And we're continuing through this year to fill in some more of these gaps that are on this map here. You can see in general from an ambient standpoint, our concentrations for PFOA and PFOS, our averages are around 2 nanograms per liter, and as was stated previously, often the practical quantitation limit is around 4. So a lot of these values we're detecting are very low concentrations of PFAS in ambient waters. And some of the other kind of chemicals that we look at that are frequently detected, as noted in some of the other talks, are PFBS, PFBA, and PFPEA, most frequently detected. Now Sarah's going to go into our permitting strategy here for PFAS.
It's a good intro. I drew the short straw. Can I have that? Is this the clip?
Oh, yeah.
All right, so really high level overview of where we are. I could talk for a long time about it. But while my colleagues were at Bureau of Water Assessment and Management, we're kind of collecting the ambient data and trying to figure out kind of the presence of these contaminants in our environment and working to develop our water quality standards or guidance values, as Dan mentioned. My group was really focused on how are we going to get rid of these things. And so developing a strategy for how we're going to deal with that. So this is kind of our general strategy, let's say. We knew we had to first identify a priority and figure out where we should be initially focusing our efforts. We obviously needed to collect some data and figure out if we were right with where we were focusing our efforts or if we needed to expand or limit our focus. Likely we'll have to modify permits based on the data we get. And then understanding through this whole thing that we're going to have to adjust as the science evolves. And so we have to be flexible and understand that those strategies that we put out are initial strategies. They will change as we learn more. So pretty early on, we recognized that labs were going to struggle with these new methods of analyzing these compounds. As well as just trying to keep up with the demand. All of a sudden, everybody wants PFAS testing. So we knew right in the beginning we weren't going to be able to get data from everyone immediately. So we decided we were going to try to develop our plan of attack and solicit feedback from the public on those plans and make sure that we were adequately addressing the public concerns while also making them aware of what we thought were the critical areas where we should place our initial focus. So we released two strategies so far. The TOGS 1313 is our industrial permitting strategy. It's really focusing on those industrial dischargers that have direct discharges to a surface water or groundwater, not to a wastewater treatment plant. And in that list, you'll see in the Appendix A, there's a list of SIC codes or standard industrial codes that were kind of our initial like ballpark, hey, I think this might be, these industries might have a potential to have these compounds. Understanding that's just our initial thought. Then that strategy was finalized in March of 2023. This past February, we released 1314, which is the publicly owned treatment work strategy. Slightly different, but again, very similar, and I'll discuss that in a second. But that's really focused on, again, publicly owned treatment works. So, as discussed in both of those strategies, our primary focus really needed to be on potential drinking water impacts. And that's really based on the fact that our Department of Health issued MCLs that were 10, as we discussed in a previous presentation, and our guidance values are very low for our ambient waters and ambient drinking waters. Then we kind of wanted to cast a really broad net and collect at least a limited data set from a bunch of industries. We didn't really want to make any assumptions about where it was coming from, because at the time, which this started developing 5 years ago, it was like, oh, it's here, it's here, it's here, it's here. So we didn't want to make any assumptions about where it was coming from. You see EPA's focusing on 5 or 6 different industries. We wanted to cast a broader net than that. And again, collecting a limited data set to try to not expend a bunch of resources where it's not needed, but to still collect data that we thought would help inform our strategies. So right now, that's kind of where we are. We're collecting the data, we're rolling these strategies out. We modified our applications, so anybody that's applying for a SPDES permit or State Pollutant Discharge Elimination System permit, basically anyone discharging wastewater, will need to provide PFAS data to us. We're also sending out requests for information to those priority facilities we identified in those strategies. So again, those that are within the potential drinking water source or discharging to groundwater. As part of that effort, we also developed a survey that we really wanted to send out to help qualify the data we are getting from these industries. It points out, potential sources facilities might have, talks about where they collected the sample, that kind of thing. So this is currently in the phase that we're in, is really collecting this data. At the same time, we were getting a lot of inquiries. What are you doing? Where's it? Permittees were saying, what's coming next? And so we thought it would be important for us to develop kind of a PFAS landing page, at least for Division of Water. And so we put this page together. On it, there's a portal, an information portal, which is this pointer. This little guy up here. Sorry, it's so small. If you click on that, there is the gray areas are those watersheds or potential watersheds that that could potentially impact drinking water. And then the blue kind of triangles that are in there are those surface water dischargers that are going to a surface water within those HUCs or watersheds. And then there's green triangles in there that are the groundwater dischargers. So kind of our priority facilities, if you will. We also developed templates to help permittees request analysis from labs. It's kind of a little different of a request from what permittees are typically receiving or used to getting. So we knew it was going to generate a lot of questions and a lot of concerns, so we tried to make it as easy as we could for them by giving them the tools that they would need. So there's a chain of custody form, template, and the lab analysis template. We developed sampling tips to help ensure that permittees weren't contaminating their own sample. So we put that on there. And I think the most interesting or most important thing we put on there are really these track down checklists that we developed. We did one for industrial facilities and one for POTWs. And that's really, if they have detections, it gives them a place to start looking immediately, so they don't have to wait for us to modify their permit. They can get a head start and get started on trying to figure out where it's coming from, and maybe even eliminate it before we even come knocking. So I guess in the future, we will have to modify permits. Some of them are already being modified to add some monitoring. Again, limited monitoring until we know if it's a continuous source. But we'll use, once we have this data and we figure out if the permits do need to be modified, we'll just use our standard permitting tools. We have several in our toolbox. We can ask for more monitoring. We can set action levels. We can set effluent limits. Probably the most important for us is this idea of a pollutant minimization plan or track down plan. We know treating this at the end of the pipe is going to be tough. So tracking it down and figuring out where it's coming from, even for industries to separate their processes and figure out what specific process is adding to it, will be important. So that's going to be a big piece of the puzzle. And then I think somebody else used this little guy too. We have to adjust. So science is evolving. EPA is working on effluent limitation guidelines. When those come out, we'll be bound by those. There's new water quality standards guidance values coming for new compounds. And of course, as we get data, we'll probably figure out we need to focus on a different industry than what we had previously thought. Or maybe industries that we have on our list don't have it anymore. We don't know. So we have to be able to be flexible and adjust as we learn more. That is all I have, so hopefully.
Thank you very much. Is there a quick question?
Quick question. I didn't notice semiconductors on the list. Are you going to add them? I hope so.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah. I mean, we've already gotten comments on them. Yeah, there's a list. There's actually a number of SIC codes that aren't on there that we already know we have to add to the list. 1314, our latest tags, actually contemplates that. It says this list is going to be changing, and so you need to go to our emerging contaminants website to see the updated list. So it's evolving. It's evolving. And we're collecting data from everybody that does a application.
Can I ask, this is yes or no question.
Okay.
Fish data, are you collecting fish data?
Yes, I'm not, but our Division of Fish and Wildlife is definitely collecting fish data. Yep.
Great. Thank you very much, Sarah and Dan. We appreciate your being here today.